Very good morning. So we are specifically talking about the issues with related to this particular bill. Before doing that, we need to understand what are the provisions of this particular bill, right, in detail. Let us see some of the provisions before. First thing is that this bill tries to define what is personal data. Okay, so it categorizes personal data into three categories. One is general personal data, second is special personal data or specific personal data, and third is critical personal data. Okay, what is general personal data? Just like name, age, height, weight. Okay, what is special or specific this personal data? What is that this particular data define? It's like health condition of the particular person or insurance. What is insurance claims that he is having? These kinds of data will be there. And what is critically something very so intrinsic that it goes and peeps into the life of the person. Okay, like passwords. These are critical personal data, right? In this way, these three kinds of data are being regulated through this bill. So it bill contains several provisions related to processing of this data. So bill talks about the data should be used for specific, okay, clear and lawful purpose. These three words are specifically used. Specific, clear and lawful purpose. Only for those reasons the data should be processed. And for the processing of data, as I told you, specific, clear and lawful purpose. And there is an entity or institution or an individual who will be named as data fiduciary. What is data fiduciary? Does anyone know? What is data fiduciary? Think it as a particular individual or an institution which will be processing the data. What do you mean by processing data? Collecting, compiling it, segregating it, classifying it, and then providing it to the companies. That is also that comes to the next aspect of this provision. It talks about the applicability of this processing of data. Who can apply for this data? Okay, there are certain limitations for them, like government is there, private companies are there, public companies are there. How these people will be using this data? Who can apply and access this data? All these provisions is also there. Applicability. And then it also talks about several rights. And bill talks about there are several new words that are used. What data principle, the word is used. Data principle is nothing but a person or an individual whose data is being processed. You are getting my point, no? These are small terms, but you should be using them while you write an exam. Okay, that's what differentiate your answer from others, right? These specific words which are used in this bill itself. And bill also tries to, restrict data mirroring. What is data mirroring? Yeah, like thing happened with Cambridge Analytica, where it copied the data, it took the data from Facebook and used it to influence the political outcomes. That kind of mirroring of data, copying data and storing it as specific purpose and using it for other means without any consent of an individual or the data principle, which I should say, consent of the data principle, right? That is where we come to the first right to be consulted, right to receive or right to access consent or something like that. Okay, the person should give the consent, only then you will be able to process his data, his or her data, right? And then right to be forgotten. If a data principal wants the data fiduciary to forget his data, he has to remove his data from this list. Okay? And right to obtain information from the data fiduciary is also the right given to the data principal. That means person can access, okay, what kind of data is present with you. Show me what kind of data you are processing, which data you are keeping securing it for me. These kind of things are also there. And right to data portability. What is this data portability? As simple as that. Yeah, something like that. You can access data and transfer the data from one data fiduciary to another data fiduciary. Some people will feel comfortable if they are not feeling comfortable with one particular data fiduciary. They'll transfer their data to others. What else? There is one institutional arrangement. What is that institutional arrangement? It is going to monitor and Data Protection Authority of India, yes. Data Protection Authority. Okay. This is the institutional setup that the bill is proposing in order to monitor and enforce this bill or this provisions under this bill to protect the personal data, to secure the individual privacy. Right to privacy is now a fundamental right. What is that judgment? What is that case called? It was in prelims also, I think. Okay. Puttaswamy case. Okay. Remember these things. What else? It talks about the data transfer. Outside the country. There is something called as sensitive personal data, and sensitive personal data can be transferred outside the country only with the consent of the individual, data principal. Okay, understand that thing. Sensitive principal data only with the consent of the individual. Critical personal data will not be transferred at any cost, will not be processed or transferred outside the country. It will be stored and processed within the country itself. Critical personal data. And of course, general personal data can be transferred to any entity or even outside the country. Okay? And then it talks about social media intermediaries. So it wants the social media intermediaries to develop some kind of voluntary user verification mechanism. Okay, voluntary user verification mechanism. Through this, what is going to have? What is it? It is aiming at. What is the biggest problem with social media or any kind of internet usage or cyberspace usage? Fake news? No. How is it fake news is being provided? Identity, anonymity of the person. You cannot particularly identify any person very easily. So there is high scope of anonymous living in the cyberspace. That is where this kind of user verification mechanism should be placed so that that kind of anonymity, that the anonymous persons who are living in the social media profiles and all, they can be pulled out. I think Facebook has brought in some community related verification mechanism to process, to bring out the credible, okay, the person's identity, who is the person identified, only then he will be able to use the Facebook. Okay, community scrutiny is something they have brought in. Facebook has brought in such kind of things. So the community itself, the Facebook community, the people itself will be scrutinizing whether the existence of the person is there or not. Right? Anyone who has Gmail will start an account without any proofs. Like a small kid is 18 years or less than 14 years of age, who should not be accessing these social media platforms, will be accessing through fake Gmail IDs or email IDs or anything, right? These things are happening. Okay, majorly these are the provisions. There are many more. But there is one more provision which needs to be mentioned here is the exceptions provided for the processing of data. Under the name of national security, national sovereignty, government can access data. That is where the criticism has started. Anyway, due to various reservations of certain sections of the people, okay, this bill has been given to the joint parliamentary committee that we are going to discuss in the next topic. But let us focus on the issues present in this first of all. Okay, I think these things are clear. I am erasing. But anyway, before addressing the issues, what is the significance? What are the merits of this bill? What kind of impact that it could have if it has been enacted and implemented? Tell me. Go with the data, the word data itself. No, go with, what happens is that data is the new economic resource, right? Now data mining is the richest economic activity that is happening and that is going to happen. With the advancement of technology to Internet of Things or artificial intelligence or data science or data analytics or anything. Okay, machine learning, these all things. All are relying on this data. Once we have certain safeguards present with legal backing, proper protection of this data can happen. That is what data localization, that is what the B.N. Sri Krishna committee has recommended. We need to push for data localization, right? That can happen. And I think last year itself, there is a German intelligence agency which talked about several cyber attacks on Indian companies. And that there was a huge uproar in the parliament then to pass this bill as soon as possible in the public itself, but in the parliament they could not pass because of several reservations. Okay, public there was acceptance within the public that this data should be passed, this bill should be passed as quickly as possible. But anyway, we should see certain criticisms that are there before going to it. What else? What else are the merits? Can you think?
This data will be easy for government to make the schemes.
They're very good for good governance, right? Better targeting of beneficiaries can happen. And also, as I said previously, I was talking about specific schemes can be created for a specific section of people, right? So better targeting can happen with this usage of data, right? Labor migrants, these people keep moving, they are seasonal. When to provide them social security net is very much necessary to think about, and having that data about their movement and all will be helpful for the government to create more scientific way of providing welfare measures, right? What else? Can anyway government gain from finances? Revenue can generate revenue? No. When you have this data, government will have the ability to tax these giants in the social media platform. Google tax, we are listening, no? It is happening with minimum global tax that the G7 countries have proposed. That minimum 15% of taxes can be applied to global giants. Okay, government can bring out certain strategy. Now we are having certain equalization levy that we are following to tax certain giants, okay, social media platforms who are using our, you are generating revenue through advertisements. And that revenue should be taxed, that is what government has said. But anyway, there is huge criticism of that particular measure taken by the government, not particularly in India but outside India. Okay. What else? Definitely privacy, legally we can Okay, these are certain merits that you can think about. Okay, the data threat, financial threats that are happening through cyberspace and all, these can be protected at least as least as possible. But anyway, there are several criticisms that we need to talk about are the issues. Okay, it is said that bill has fell short of the B N Sri Krishna committee's recommendations. Now, we cannot go through all the recommendations, but what are the specifically the exemption provisions which I told you, which is going to give overarching powers to the government to use the data. If something which is a data which is non-personal in nature, what is this data that is non-personal in nature? Can you give any example of data that is non-personal in nature? Population, census, these are the things which are non-personal in nature. They are not personal details. And government has exclusive right to use this non-personal data. Okay, that is okay. But still, there are certain exemptions like public purpose, national security, national sovereignty. No one is defining these aspects very clearly. So these exceptions are not narrow, they are broader and they are giving overarching powers to the government to make use of this data. We do not know how this data is going to be used by the government. And there are several examples across the world where this data has been mined and has been misused by various governments. What is that particular case? Edward Sweden Wikipedia case. Anyway, we'll talk about it later when time permits. That is what he used certain CIA's Central Intelligence Agency of America is actually using these personal information of the people to keep a track on them, especially after this 9/11 attack. Okay, and Edward Snowden actually exposed that thing, and now he is facing certain issues there. Anyway, that kind of thing I am telling you. So I am giving an example of how the government can misuse the data. Okay, that is one thing. And when this can happen, is it really protecting the right to privacy that is provided in the Puttaswamy's case? And what is the grievance mechanism that is placed? It is not properly mentioned. There is a single provision which is mentioned that there will be an establishment of proper grievance redressal mechanism under the Data Protection Authority. That cannot happen. There should be clear guidelines of how the person can approach a Data Protection Authority and have his grievance addressed. So that is not been clearly mentioned in the bill. Okay, but B N Sri Krishna committee has provided certain things. And same thing with regard to the Data Protection Authority. The composition of this Data Protection Authority has also been criticized, which said that most of the members are going to be appointed by the government itself, and data is being used by not just government. No, independence of this authority is very much required. When more and more government personnel are there in this authority, it affects the independent functioning of this particular authority. Okay, these are the two main issues related to B N Sri Krishna committee. But talk about data localization. Okay, data localization, we have mentioned, it is very clear that critical data will not be used. Sensitive data will be used only with the consent of the individual. This is how the data localization is being pushed forward through in this bill. But talk about this encryption of data. This Twitter or the Facebook, they have certain mechanism of encrypting this data, and what is the purpose of having data localization when they are having these encryptions? National governments will not be able to use that data from those technology giants, social media giants. So what is the use of data localization then? National authorities are not having access to this encrypted information. So the purpose of data localization is half fulfilled. That is what the criticism is there. Okay, even though we bring this bill, the data localization aim of having complete data being present within the country is somewhat challenging still. Okay, it depends upon the implementation of various things, and also the cooperation of these multinational institutions as well as the other countries. Cyberspace is interlinked to all the countries, no? We talked about internet shutdown. So how these regulations, how internet shutdown will, it is going to affect several things which we mentioned last time. How this bill is going to address those things? It is silent on them, right? Talk about the economic aspects. What are the issues, economic issues that can arise with this data protection bill? You can interpret many things. See, that means regulating the data or regulating the processing of data is thought to be affecting the, what do you say, free flow of information across the world, which is going to make Indian companies incompetitive. Indian companies need free flow of data, free flow of ideas, which is happening through social media and this cyberspace. And regulating this processing of data will affect that thing. The competitiveness of Indian industries might get affected if you are not creating an open and free usage of data. Okay, what else? Startups. Startups need this some information of understanding in order to understand the market. And when startups do not have sufficient financial resources to access this data from data fiduciaries. Obviously, data fiduciary will be charging them for accessing data. How will they survive? Data fiduciary will survive. So definitely, the giants, the competitors, the startups are already having certain giants will be competing with whom they will be competing with, right? Those will have an upper hand, and the startup culture, which is actually booming in India, can get affected. And how will you make sure that that kind of ecosystem will not get affected? Right? These are the several issues that are present in this. And regulation of social media, is it so easy through this bill? No. And there is one IT Ministry's Artificial Intelligence Committee that was set up. And that committee said that this bill is over-regulating. Rather than over-regulating, it should focus on having sectoral insights on usage of data, but like financial sector, we should have certain entity to take care of data. Something like that, sectoral rise of data processing should be taking place, not an overarching thing. Decentralized way of processing data and using this data should happen. That is what the committee has said. It is suggesting a way out, but we do not know. The government ultimately, the committee is only a recommendatory body, no? It is ultimately the government decision whether to accept it or not. Okay? You are getting my points, no? These are the several criticisms or issues that are present here. Anyway, the bill has been informed, has been transferred to this joint parliamentary committee. That is where the discussion of joint parliamentary committee will be started. Anyway, tell me the vague idea, does anyone have any idea about this joint parliamentary committee?
Joint Parliament Committee, Lok Sabha will have more members compared to Rajya Sabha.
Okay. But anyway, 1 second. There is a question that asks, right to be consented is only given for specific data. See, that specific provision is particularly to transfer data outside the country, okay? But right to be consented is there in general also. Okay, I think I am clear here. Okay, coming to data joint parliamentary committee. See, understand there are several committees for that the parliament. How is it going? From where is it drawing the powers? Like, from which provision of the constitution that the joint parliamentary committee is being established? There are two constitutional provisions. One is Article 105, which talks about the privileges of the parliament, and Article 118, which talks about the power of the parliament to regulate its procedure. Okay, Based on these two constitutional articles, this joint parliamentary committee or any other committee is backed, right? So what is this joint parliamentary committee? It is ad hoc in the sense that it is established only for specific purpose, only for specific duration. Once its purpose has been fulfilled, the committee will collapse or it will be closed or it will not be functioning. Okay, ad hoc for specific purpose and specific duration. And how is it going to be constituted? How is it going to be set up? It is set up through a motion, okay, that is passed in one house, okay, and agreed by other. Motion needs to be passed only in one house and that is agreed by in the other house, that's it. Once that is done, this joint parliamentary committee will be set up and the membership is decided by the parliament itself. There is no fixed membership in this committee. Okay, membership is decided by the parliament itself, decided by parliament. And it does not have any fixed kind of membership, and generally there is a ratio that is followed, that is 2:1. Lok Sabha, if there are 2 members, Rajya Sabha there will be 1 member. And do you have the idea of when these kind of joint committees were established previously? Basically the purpose I am trying to bring you out, during what situations these joint parliamentary committees were established are being established. One is related to this bill, no? To examine certain bills, purpose of this joint parliamentary committees, examining bills or financial irregularities in the government's activity. Is there any other committee which is focusing upon the financial aspects of the government? Any other committee? It is not a ad hoc committee. Planning committee, no. You guys need to revise your Lakshmikant. Financial committees are there in our country, no? Public Accounts Committee, Public Undertaking, Committee on Public Undertakings, and then Estimates Committee. These are 3 financial committees which you should remember. And this aspect will come very close to the Public Accounts Committee. Now tell me, what are the differences that you are finding between Joint Parliamentary Committee and Public Accounts Committee? Now I have given you certain aspects. Identify the differences. That is how UPSC will ask frame question. What is the difference between Joint Accounts Committee and Public Accounts Committee? And you should draw a table and then explain what are the differences. I find out, no?
This is temporary body.
Okay, that is not particularly permanent, but that is actually reviewed rate. That is set up every yearly, right? New membership is going to be placed in the Public Accounts Committee every year. Membership, talk about the differences in membership. Here there can be, it is decided by parliament. There that is fixed. 22 members are there. 22, 15 and 7. Okay, 22 members are there, 15 from Lok Sabha and 7 from Rajya Sabha. Right. What is the purpose then? What are the differences in purpose of these committees? Specifically, the Public Accounts Committee will talk about audit reports. We will review the audit reports of CAG. Okay, and it its function is restricted there only. It will talk about the where the government has spent and how the government has spent the budget, its budget, and what is the CAG report, and it will evaluate that CAG report and all. These are the purposes, main functions of this Public Accounts Committee. But Joint Parliamentary Committee is specific, no? It is not just about CAG or any other thing. Okay? And it can go beyond the CAG's report to investigate any case. Now tell me, what are the powers and functions of this Joint Parliamentary Committee? What could be the powers and functions?
To examine the bill and any modifications required, we will suggest.
Okay. What else? Okay, you can mention them. One is confidentiality. Why this confidentiality is required is because Joint Parliamentary Committee means members from different political parties will be coming there. They can come there and talk freely. In order to exercise that freedom, there is requirement of certain kind of confidentiality. Okay, that is where, and also while resolving cases of financial irregularities also, that kind of confidentiality is required for them. Okay. Second is evidence. It can call for any document, it can call for any oral or written evidences, it can demand. Okay, Joint Parliamentary Committee can demand such kind of things. And next, the speaker, if there is any dispute related to the calling of evidence, the speaker will step in and will decide the case. The later joint, there are certain, within this committee, there will be members who will be disputing about, okay, this is not the way that we should call the evidence or something. They will be disputing themselves. In order to give a final say with regard to this particular dispute, speaker will have the final say. Okay. These are the basics of this Joint Parliamentary Committee. But one question I will be asking you and leaving you there. Whether minister will be a member of Joint Parliamentary Committee.
They can be a member, but on the ambit of their.
Is minister a member of Public Accounts Committee?
No, sir. This should be direct member because the opposition also will.
No, I am not going to answer. You find out and tell me this answer next week, okay? No, it is an ad. Okay, they are mentioning one more difference, that is Public Accounts Committee is a standing committee and this is an ad hoc committee. It is a nomenclature difference anyway. Let us move on to the next topic. Left wing extremism. How do we define left wing extremism? Anyway, why is it in news first of all? Did you guys read about it? Yeah, review committee. There is a review committee which talked about the present status of left wing extremism. Anyway, what is that present status that the committee has, or that review meeting has been talking about? That is where you need to find out the data and present it, understanding the present situation of left wing extremism in the country. There are 3 points that are being mentioned.
Means mainly focused on the red card.
Okay, yes. So the present status, they are talking about the extension of this red corridor. How extend this red corridor is, and has it shrunk or not? So extension of red corridor, it is talked about the data 2010 and 2020 data. It talked about this red corridor was covering 90 districts back then. Now it is 41 or 42, okay? 42. 41 only, no? Yeah. Don't remember the exact things. Approximate things is enough. And second thing that they are telling is 25 districts within this 41 are catering to the 85% of violence. Okay. And thirdly, it talks about incidents, decrease in incidents of clash and deaths. There are about 2,260 incidents that took place in the year 2009, and now it has brought down to around somewhere around 500 or something. Do not exactly remember the number, somewhere very low. Okay, numbers are there. 908.
Last law, 660.
Yeah, 665, yes. Somewhere like that. Yeah. Okay. And deaths, it is written again, I think. Civilian and security forces deaths. 908, 183. This is data. So the casualties or the incidents of violence are reducing, and it is a good sign, but the threat is not yet completely removed. Right? That is the biggest challenge. Okay. Now tell me, let's go back to the basics. Tell me, what is left-wing extremism? Radical group. Okay. Before defining, tell me the characteristics of this particular group. Then you can define it, no? We can define it using these characteristics. Tell me. Radicalism, it's too strong word to use. They use violence as a means. To fulfill their aims, to ensure that there is non-functioning of government. They instill fear among the public servants. They want to bring out a revolution on the lines of Chinese revolution. Right? Yeah. And fourthly, they want to gain support from Dalits and Adivasis, because they are the least developed people of the country. Okay, these are the characteristics. But why left-wing extremism? Why?
They want a free state without any political scrolling.
Is it so? Then why is some of the political parties who are backing this violence are participating in democracy, participating in elections and all? No, not particularly. When you talk about the causes, you should talk about the developmental deficit. Okay, that it will be a political statement if you talk in such way. Okay, that is why try to avoid them. Oh, causes. Exploitation. People, tribal people or the poor section of the people are very much linked to their culture, or their society is very much linked to the forest and the nature. Jal, jungle and zameen are being taken away from them. What does this create? This creates another problem of social exclusion. Loss of rights, loss of cultural identity, land alienation, displacement All these things are taking place. This is somewhat creating social exclusion. They are not being looked as an Indian itself. That is what they feel. This is due to the skewed development, asymmetric development that is taking place in India. Green Revolution, Punjab, Haryana, they were prospering. These lands have been neglected during this particular time. So developmental deficit has been one of the reasons. So why did this word Naxalism come up? Yeah, Naxalbari event which took place in the year 1967. Naxalbari is a small village in West Bengal. Okay, and what were they fighting for? To gain access to lands. The peasants who are tilling the land, they want the ownership of this land, and the land reforms in our country in the initial years have failed. That is what the next thing. Failure of land reforms. I should include them in this point actually. And then what is developmental deficit in the terms of unemployment? Okay, lack of education, lack of health facilities, lack of infrastructure, lack of access to anything to live a decent standards of life. Okay. Okay, developmental deficit. Okay, what has been the government strategy now? Now we know the causes, but what has been the government strategy and what is it still? But okay, better coordination, but that is one of the challenge actually. Okay, which I should say. Tell me a particular word which you should always use while you talk about the approach of government while addressing the left-wing extremism. Anyway, before that, tell me, are there any other causes which you are mentioning right now? What you are mentioning is right now is governance problems are also there. Right? The police personnel in the initial, public personnel in the initial years during the origins of this extremism and all, they were not sensitive to this, to these people. And it was said that the police personnel are opening fires without listening to them. There is no relationship that is being developed between the public personnel and the people who are undergoing this violence. Violence is thought to be addressed by violence itself. That is the kind of attitude that the governance system used to have, and that has been changed because they understood that this problem is not going to go away. Okay, that is one of the, and also corruption is there, seriously. How land alienation takes place, and you must be knowing in anthropology there are several case studies that are taking, that you might know, that how the government will bypass certain laws to make sure that there is a consent from the villagers. They'll say that okay, the MNCs and all the companies who wants to get their land, they'll say that okay, we have gone there, we have taken consent from them, and they'll bring out the fraud documents. And after few years, the people will be knowing their okay, our document. They are saying that we have given the consent for the transfer of land. No, these kind of things will happen. So that is kind of corruption that is taking place. There is a governance deficit, also one of the causes of the persistence of left-wing extremism. Forget about the origin, but the governance deficit is making sure that this kind of internal security aspect is persisting. So it used to be seen as a law and order problem in the initial years. It is not seen as an internal security issue. It is not seen as a security issue, but as a law and order problem. It should be resolved through police itself and all. But anyway, the aspect of addressing this left-wing extremism has been changed, and the government has taken this approach called as two-pronged approach, where it will have hard approach and also the soft approach. This is how you can actually divide the government's, what's the response to address this left-wing extremism, and you should list what are the steps that the government has taken in this hard approach and this soft approach. Tell me what are the government steps in hard approach. Showing the carrot and stick approach. That is how you can talk about carrot and stick. First is police modernization. That is what Andhra Cobra units, specially trained forces to tackle this these forms of violence. Greyhounds. Greyhounds, yes, exactly. Police modernization. What else? The central government is giving the financial assistance to state governments in the way of special security related scheme or special infrastructure scheme in order to train this personnel, okay, in order to equip this personnel in a proper way, in order to address this, okay, violence in red corridor regions. What else? Hard approach. Use of technology, usage of drones in order to identify them, identify their movement, usage of GPS technology. This is also one of the hard approach to identify, to bring out the intelligence of how they are moving, where they are staying, in order to anticipate their future attacks and prevent them. And there is an act called as Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and that act is applicable for them, whoever are caught. Okay, these are the measures that the government has taken for in the not hard approach, but soft approach is most important thing. The main reason for them fighting is development deficit. So soft approach is make sure that development happens for them as quickly as possible. So first thing that government thought about is having the resettlement and rehabilitation program for these people. Whoever wants to come out of these organizations and all, and they'll come out and give out information to the police or the government, they'll be given a rehabilitation so that they won't be going into jail or facing all the consequences and all. You're getting my point now? Surrender and rehabilitation policy. Okay, in more specific way. And surrender rehabilitation is there. Focus on rehabilitation. How is it that rehabilitation is going to take place for them? Most of them are young.
Giving some welfare measures to open schools to address
Very good. Residential schools was the concept that the government has talked about. Providing residential schools. Schools itself is not enough. They need to have food. They need to have a stays or roof to stay. So they thought that if they are very young, providing residential school is a better way to ensure their proper rehabilitation. And then education is okay. And then in order to employ them, not particularly stand up, there is more important thing which provides unskilled work to the people. What is it? What is that scheme? Yes. Narega. Okay. Without even any skills, they can be employed through MG Narega. But skill development also is focused upon them. There is a scheme called Roshini, specifically focused on skill developing these people itself. Okay. And one more important case study is there, Bastar region of Chhattisgarh. The very beautiful development is taking place. That development is called as road-led development. Okay, once the road has been laid in that region in a proper way, that is how the these people who are in these organizations are, what is it, disrupting, no, infrastructure development. They want to disrupt this, but when the government has been successful in laying the road there, the Buster region, the economy has lit up there. Along that road, we are seeing hospitals, education institutions, okay, small retail shops being developed. Economy is getting back there. So it has been considered as a very good case study where the road-led development has changed the face of that Buster region. But anyway, there is still a threat. Somewhere a positive result is there, no? That is where the deficit is, development deficit. But why is it that these kind of things are not happening at every location of Red Corridor? That is a question that we need to answer. What is still the challenges related to this left-wing extremism? And there is one more recent scheme related to soft approach. What is it? Aspirational district program. Have you heard of this term, aspirational district program? No? There are certain number of districts, I think 115 districts were selected across the country, and specific focus is being, which are most backward also. Okay, and I think in that 115, almost 30 to 35 districts are coming in this Red Corridor only. Okay, in this program specifically a public servant will be named as, I think, Pradhan or something, okay, and he will be taking in charge of the development, and he will be answering the PMO or the central government about the development that is taking place in that aspirational district. Okay. And the aspirational district program has been in mains, I think. In the year 2018, it is there in mains. Okay. Take a look at that particular program anyway. Okay. Now why is it the challenge still persisting? What are the reasons for it? We should talk about that one. And the status, the data that we have talked about in the status is well and good, but still the challenge still lies. What are the challenges? Tell me. First important challenge, it should be very easy for you to find out this particular challenge. Where are these extremists are getting arms or anything? Black market or financial linkages that these organizations are having is not being addressed. That means is not being cut. No one knows where they are getting finances. Organized crime might be there. There are many aspects of it. There is a larger picture. The financial network or the financial backup still there for these.
There are some allegations like the Naxals are forcing the tribals to give their.
That is what. Hard measures. They are obviously they are employing several measures. That is what. That financial backbone that which they are having should be cut. Only then we will be able to address this extremism to its roots. Of course, that is some hard way of doing it, but focusing on soft approach is very much important. What else? Is there any political reason also? Leadership. Is mainly from these political parties, from CPI and CPIM and all. They are influenced by their leadership, no? So somewhere down the line their leadership has to be engaged with, so that they will try to encourage these extremist groups to give up their arms and come to the table, negotiating table. So a lot has to be done with regard to leadership, with regard to addressing this. What else? Now we talked about there is a reduction in number of districts in the red corridor and all. But do you think that it is so easy that okay, these areas will not be coming under this influence again? No, there is still a threat. Probably new areas will be coming into their fold. We do not know. Whenever there can be some kind of developmental deficit, that can become a reason for them to go there and cover that space or area. So the threat is there. Okay. Threat of protecting secured spaces as well as new spaces. Some spaces are secured, no, now. So, what else? Fourth one. There is a federal challenge in this. Once which you are talking about the cooperation between the states as well as the cooperation between center and the states. And that is soft approach. You should mention them in soft approach. Okay, PISA. Those are all skill development approach. That is also there. You can mention all of them in soft approach. So talking about the state to state cooperation and center state cooperation, this is a federal challenge in addressing this issue. State police are not interconnected to share the information. How will you integrate these police, thanas, police stations and all to cooperate each other? And then center and state, center has recently withdrawn the financial aid under special security related scheme is there. Okay, security related scheme. The scheme itself is named like this. Okay, security related expenditure scheme, I think. Yeah, security related expenditure scheme. Okay, the central government has withdrawn certain finances to the state governments. So, state governments, whenever they are, using certain finances to address this left-wing extremism area, the central government will reimburse them for all the finances, for all the costs that they take, okay, through these schemes. But now, central government has reduced this financial aid, and Jharkhand, in this review meeting, Jharkhand has complained that only. You getting my point, no? Between the states, there is lack of coordination in sharing information, sharing technology, sharing personnel. Okay. And then between center and state, there is a financial problem, financial challenge. What else? What else can be the challenge? Slow pace of development. Years of since 1967, if at all, approximately we take. It has not been enough for us to resolve this case. That is mainly because of the slow pace of development that is taking place. That is the main reason among them all. The persistence of this threat. So tell me, are there any other measures that recently government has taken? That is same, no? So what the government has said with related to that expenditure is, Home Minister has said that now we are deploying Central Reserved Police Force (CRPF). So the state governments are not having additional cost to train personnel and all, so that we need not reimburse them. There is a logic why the central government has reduced its financial aid. Okay, it said that we are deploying Central Reserve Police Force now. So state governments are not having additional cost now. Center itself is directly bearing the additional cost. So that is why we are reducing our financial aid. That is what the response has been. And related to this threat of gaining this influence into new areas or the already secure areas. So government has designated these districts as districts of special concern. Okay, categorizing these districts in different ways very much important to address, to have a better policy towards that particular district. Okay. So classification is very much important, and that has been done. Okay. I think that is district of concern. Okay, new categorization. District of concern, it is called as. And have you heard of this? Yeah. What is this Samadhan?
Smart leadership.
Yeah, it is just a doctrine, the central government, that is actually talking about the hard approach as well as soft approach. That's it. It is just a doctrine specifying an approach of how to tackle this left-wing extremism or Naxalism in our country. Okay, this is related to left-wing extremism. We'll end today. Thank you.
Welcome to Vishnu IAS Academy. We are excited to announce the launch of our new courses. Contact us for registrations and counseling. Hard work never fails. Keep learning.